You're listening to Fresh Hope Today, episode 105. Well, welcome. Hi, I'm Brad Hafes, your host for Fresh Hope Today, and welcome to you. We're sure glad that you're taking time to listen to this, and we're praying that this podcast is a help to you. One of the best ways that you and I can get better in our recovery and in our walk through the mental health issues that we might have in our lives is really to hear the stories of other people. And hearing their stories many times will help you and me to pick up on something that, I identify with that. And to hear one another's stories can give us encouragement and hope. Because, friend, we want to empower you to live a full and rich life in spite of having a mental health diagnosis. And sometimes we can be working with our psychiatrist and our counselor, as I did, and you end up feeling helpless. And sometimes you can end up feeling hopeless. And so we find that when peers talk to peers, and that's somebody who has a diagnosis with somebody else who has a diagnosis, that when we talk and when we share, there is such incredible insight and support there for one another. And so that's our goal today. We want to empower you to live a full and rich life. We want to give you hope, that there's hope, and you don't have to settle for being helpless with a mental health challenge. And both myself and Melody, who's joining me today, we both have a diagnosis and both have walked through issues. I have bipolar 1 disorder and can honestly say that for the last 12 to almost 13 years now, I've lived pretty much symptom-free, nothing drastic, no major swings or hospitalizations. I haven't had to do anything but be proactive and take care of myself and do what's necessary to kind of stay on top of it. And it's quite possible to do that. Welcome, Melody.
Hi.
You too have bipolar disorder, if I remember right.
Yes.
Correct?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm glad that you're here. I appreciate your willingness to do this. And just go ahead, Melody, introduce our listeners to who you are and tell them a little bit about your journey, maybe about your family.
Mm-hmm. I'm a mother of 3, and I'm married for almost 31 years.
Congratulations.
Thanks. My journey started when I was pretty young. I'm not going to go into detail over things that happened, but you might notice this in your life. I was molested at a very young age, got into some pornography, just a lot of
Sorry, I was telling her to move her microphone, so go ahead, Melody. Yeah.
A lot of things, and when I was 16, I was diagnosed as depressed and suicidal.
Uh-huh.
But I can see that's when I was starting, where the bipolar was starting to take a hold, and I did a lot of drugs, like hard drugs, like LSD, and I smoked pot on a daily basis. I drank a little bit. I was self-medicating.
Sure.
I just hurt so deep. But yeah, I had those really heavy swings between being real high and being real low.
What would happen when you were real high? What was that like?
I was very energetic. I was a little promiscuous.
Okay.
I think those were the two. I got things done. Very creative.
Mm-hmm. I think a lot of people think when they think mania, they think somebody out there running up and down the streets, just wild and crazy, But mania can be just surges of energy. Mm-hmm. It can be surges of productivity, surges of creativity. And for some, if they're bipolar 2, I don't know if you're bipolar 1 or 2, you're bipolar 1. For those who are bipolar 2, many times the diagnosis is missed and they're just being treated as being depressed with major depressive disorder, and they're not getting better. I've heard a psychiatrist say that if you're not better in 90 days after taking medicine for just simple clinical depression, that you need to fire your doctor. Something's wrong. And, the cycling in and out of depression and feeling somewhat normal and feeling okay, too, is cycling. And so that's a different aspect of bipolar disorder. And people will say, well, I've never had the mania. I've never had the ups. Well, quite honestly, bipolar is really a cycling mood disorder. It's not necessarily that you go way up and way low. That's one kind, but you can cycle in and out. So I think it's important for people to understand other people's mania,
I think as I've gotten older, my mania has gotten worse. I have, the last time, over 4.5 years ago, I had a lot of psychosis, and it started in November until I was hospitalized in February. That is, my family just about went nuts, didn't know what to do with me.
Yeah. What kind of psychosis? When you say psychosis, what do you mean?
Well, let's see. I put around the front door all this stuff like survival stuff for people that were going to come and needed it, because it was a bad winter that year. And I was going to send them 2 doors down to these other Christians, and they would take care of them. I mean, I had bought evaporated milk, all
kinds of survival
yes.
things.
And then and I told my husband, there's going to be a Latino couple that's going to come, and she's not going to be very old, but we're going to deliver the baby, and it's going to be named Jesus.
Okay.
Those are the types of things that I would do. Or I would do experiments. Well, I thought they were experiments, like Sir Isaac Newton.
Okay.
And my family just, they didn't know what to think.
Well, it was, yeah. Do you remember that? Do
Yes.
you remember doing those things?
Yes.
And so you just felt, did you hear voices, or did you feel just impressions?
Impressions.
Okay.
Just really strong.
Yeah.
I even undid my husband's computer, all of it, and I hid it out in the garage. And I told him I was sorry I was tired of having that cash cow, I called it.
Okay.
Because he did all of his business and stuff on there. And
sure.
He was angry.
Oh, I'm sure he was. So how did you end up in the hospital then?
I really lost it one day and called my husband every name in the book. I was screaming at him. And I said, just take me to the hospital. It's got to be better than being here. And I went and got my coat, sat in the pickup. What it did to my daughter that still lived at home, it messed her up so bad that when I was being released from the hospital, she says, if Mom's coming home, I'm leaving.
Oh, my.
And so I didn't come home for another week. I had stayed with friends.
Because they had to figure it out.
Yeah, we had to figure out, what we're going to do with my daughter. And it took a greater part of 2 years before we were back to where we were before I went in.
Yeah.
But now it's better than ever.
Yeah.
Because I've helped educate them.
And did you hear what she just said? It's better than ever. The truth is, if you and I will but work at our recovery, if we will but choose to take our life back and do the things that we know will give us a better life and become more whole, and we can be empowered to live a full and rich life in spite of having this.
Another thing that happened to me was I was misdiagnosed for about 14 years. Yeah. I landed at Richard Young when that used to be here all summer, off and on. And then I was sent to Norfolk Regional Center because I'd hurt myself so bad that I got committed by the state. Okay. And then when I was done with Norfolk Regional Center, they took away the commitment and just said that I'd be living with my husband.
Okay.
So, I mean, I had a little trial and everything where they commit you.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah. Where the state takes over. Now, tell me this. you said you were misdiagnosed for 14 years, meaning they just had you as depressed? Or?
Major depressive disorder with anxiety and PTSD.
Okay. But now with the bipolar piece, when they figured that out, they started giving you a mood stabilizer, and then
it made the world a difference. I slept better. I still have little ups and downs, but like a normal person would have. Normal. What's normal?
Sure. Well, it doesn't impede your living. It doesn't interfere with your daily, you know. That's what's important, because everybody has mood swings. Everybody has issues, and certainly everyone has emotional issues, which is different than the brain dysfunction issues that you and I might have based upon chemistry or based upon the dysfunction of the brain itself. Now, how did you end up coming to Fresh Hope?
Well, the church had a sign out front that said Fresh Hope. And I drove by it so many times, and I thought, I'm just going to go check it out. That was about 4 years ago.
Yeah.
And I came just about every week.
So for those of you who are listening, I started a group 5.5 years ago, the first Fresh Hope group. At the time of this recording, it's 5.5 years. And we had a sign out front of the church. And so Melody was really almost one of the original members of the first go-around with Fresh Hope.
Yeah.
And so what brought you back? You came in the first time.
I felt comfortable. I felt like I wasn't being judged for the first time because of my mental health diagnosis, and that people really understood.
Had you tried other support groups, or?
Yeah.
What did you find? What is the difference, if you will, between what you experienced prior to Fresh Hope and after coming to the Fresh Hope recovery?
A lack of hope.
There was a lack of hope in the other groups.
Yes, because it wasn't Christ-centered. It was man-centered, and it was also that medical model that you talk about, where you're never going to get any better. It's
learned helplessness.
Yes.
Yeah. So talk to me about why you connect Christ and hope. What is the connection there? Our hope in Fresh Hope comes from Christ, and it's founded, or we find it in Him and Him alone. But what does that mean really to you? Why is there hope in that?
I might have to. Let me see. I grew up in a very spiritual atmosphere, and so I kind of know what it's about. It was legalistic, but I was brought up in a religious home, a spiritual home.
Spiritual.
And I learned it then. But it didn't really make sense until I started coming to Fresh Hope.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow.
I felt all shame and guilt.
Okay.
And
because it was more legalistic or more law-oriented, so to speak, and so you felt like you were failing at all the things.
And that's what changed from how I was brought up to coming to Fresh Hope. That the first time I was told there is hope, From that, before I came, it was like there was no hope. And I was going to a therapist, it was clear from 1996 to just about 4 years ago.
Which would be 2010. Yeah.
I mean, I have went back every once in a while for a tune-up, you might say, but I never go back more than once. I just need that tune-up, maybe a little pat on the back, that I'm doing okay.
Sure. Going back to the issue of hope in Christ, what I find is that without Christ, we only have wishful thinking that things will get better. We don't really have that secure fact that, it will be all right through Him. Without that, you have wishful thinking, and wishful thinking, as hard as you might try to be positive about things, doesn't really give hope in my thinking.
Yeah.
And for me, what makes us different than groups that don't share the faith part of it necessarily. I realize that groups allow people to have, they can talk about their own faith, but where it's different is we actually encourage one another with hope, and that is the hope that we have in Christ. And what is that hope? That hope is that He will absolutely take our situation and make it work for our good because He loves us. And even when I'm feeling down and I'm at my worst, that can give me hope. Because if I know who Christ is and that it's sure and certain, I don't have to feel hopeful.
Right.
I can choose hope.
Yes.
And that won't change my feelings necessarily, but ultimately to know that He's going to take my situation. And friend, if you're listening today and you're in a hopeless situation and you feel hopeless, that's okay. We understand. We have been there. And we are not saying that you shouldn't feel that way. You can feel that way. You got to work through those feelings. You got to deal with those things. But more than anything, to understand that there is hope because of Jesus. And that Romans 8:28, He can take all things and make them work together for your good. I find that you can't separate us. We're spiritual, we're physical, we're emotional, and so often in some settings, we separate everything, This is where you go for the spiritual things. This is where you go for the emotional or the psychological things. Well, I find that I need my faith to override my emotions and my feelings and my moods at times.
One of the things that a positive byproduct of hope that people can see is you have a new joy and peace about you that you didn't have before you came in. It's one of my favorite verses. It says, "May the God of hope fill you with all joy and peace in believing, that you may abound in hope in the power of the Holy Spirit." And I've hung on to that verse for a long time.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I think, too, one of the things that you probably experienced that you're describing, at least, you tell me if I've got this right, is that when you came to Fresh Hope, what you found was forgiveness and grace and mercy, and hope really resides in all of that. Because if I have God's love unconditionally, I have hope.
And I find the longer I went and I watched others, the longer they went, that hope, the thing where we go from empty to full, where your hope tank is, it kind of edges up as a person is there.
You begin to understand some of the choices that you have and can make. Yeah. So you came to Fresh Hope, and you've been around for 4 years.
Yeah.
How are you doing in your recovery right now? How is it working? How are you doing?
I handle the ups and downs of life a lot better. Although, I don't cycle down or up as much. But I am able to, I've gotten tools, you might say.
And what might some of those be? What are some of those things that you could share with our listeners?
I gotta think. My thought life and what I'm going to think about, that has been one tool. Another tool is not to shame myself. To get past that. Shame is a little bit different than guilt. Guilt says, I did a bad thing and I should be punished, or I will be punished. And shame says, I'm no good. I'm just a no good person, that I'm worthless.
Instead of saying to yourself, well, everyone makes mistakes. I didn't make a good choice there, but that's okay. I'm going to learn from it.
And then learning to make good choices, when coming to Fresh Hope, I learned that is to make positive choices. And, the more you do that, actually it comes out in your feelings. The better you feel. When you get your thinking going the right way, you start feeling it, and then you start acting different. That's that byproduct I talk about.
Right.
That
You
peace and joy.
actually act upon how you feel and what you believe. And so if your filtering system in your brain's got some stinking thinking in there, you got to get rid of it, right?
Yeah.
And you mentioned your first tool was learning to really think on certain things and not allow yourself to go down the hole, if you will, of depressive thinking. And Paul talks about taking captive
Every thought.
our thinking and think on these things. And it may seem like it's impossible to do. In fact, I would say there were points when I was severely, just terribly, terribly depressed, and that I could barely think, much less decide what I was going to think about. So it became something I had to do almost every second. I just had to just grit my teeth and say, I choose hope, and I'm not going to think about that. It's hard to not ruminate on how terrible things are.
One of the things I've done for over probably 25 years is I journal. But the difference between then and now is when I journal, after a couple of days, I pull them out and I rip them up, throw them away. I'm not going to stay. If it was a stinking thinking or really depressed or something, I'm not going to stay there. I choose to change. And so I got it out in black and white, got it outside myself so I wasn't, like you said, ruminating over it. And then I tear it up.
I think those of you who are listening, my friend, please note, she just said, I'm going to change. I choose to change. I choose to move beyond this. I'm not stuck here forever. I can change. Christ can change me. I can change my thinking. You may not be able to change your circumstances,
Right.
but he's really, he wants to love us in those circumstances and show that even in our worst of circumstances, we can have peace and peace of mind.
I think another thing I learned on a deeper level was about forgiveness of myself and others that may have hurt me in some way. This is something I picked up along the way. When I forgive somebody, I don't just forgive them. I actually go on to pray. If they don't know you as Lord and Savior, Lord, would you send people into their lives? And I pray a blessing on their life because I feel like that's being like Jesus. I'm just going beyond forgiveness.
And do you think that any unforgiveness affected possibly your mental health itself?
Yes. Yes.
Bitterness,
yes.
Yeah, takes a lot of emotional energy to be bitter.
Yeah, and there's just such a release when I've done that.
And forgiveness is really not about the other person.
Yeah.
It's really about you, right?
Yeah.
It's bitterness or unforgiveness is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die.
Yeah.
It doesn't work.
Yeah. You find yourself in a spiritual prison, as it says in the Bible, if you don't forgive. And
I think sometimes we who have a diagnosis feel like we're always the ones who cause the problems. We're always the ones that need the forgiveness. And certainly there are times where that's true. But our loved ones sometimes hurt us by their reactions to our mental health challenges and issues, right?
Yes, and I have a very understanding husband. And I've asked for forgiveness different times, and he does not even waver a bit. He says, "I accept your apology." The slate is wiped clean between us. So that's a nice thing too that I have that at home.
Yeah, some of you might not have that, and that makes it difficult because that's a wounding back at you, so to speak. And then it's unforgiveness in that situation. Or forgiving them for not forgiving you and wiping it clean is just so important to do because I find that wounded people wound other people, hurt people hurt people, And when we don't have that environment where someone says to us, I forgive you, the slate is clean, when they don't do that and they say, well, blah, 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 it's so hard to forgive them. But it's one of those things, if you and I will but forgive when we're in those situations, it can change us in that circumstance. It can change our hearts and,
The hardest thing, and I know it's this way for just about everybody, is to forgive yourself.
Oh, yes.
Because we think we don't live up to our own standards, and so it's that shame again.
Absolutely.
A
lot of us, and I always say I'm going to write a book called Shame-Based Grace, and identifying shame-based grace versus true grace, because shame-based grace really is what we do to ourselves. I shouldn't, I couldn't, I shouldn't have done this. I shouldn't have thought that. And where Jesus says, I understand, I forgive you. Now move on.
I just had an aha moment. It's like we talked on a different time about when I go home from, I facilitate a small group, that when I do that, well, I shouldn't have done that. I could have done that different. And I'm like, that's when I really do that too.
Yeah.
I don't
scold yourself.
Yes. And then I
hold it in.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's so easy to do, isn't it? One of the key things that I've learned about in my own recovery and has really stuck for me in the last 10 years is to get to that point where I say, okay, I messed up. Should have done that. Just recently, I sent out an email to leaders asking them to consider the church purchasing something. And even as I did it, I thought, well, this isn't a top priority for me, but I'd like this to happen, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And I stated my case in the email, and the first couple of emails came back like, what are you, no, we're not going to do this, or I don't want to do this through an email, and blah, blah, blah. And instead of shaming myself and saying, well, I should have known better, or getting kind of forceful back and saying, well, that would have been old patterns for me, and tried to manipulate it. I found myself saying, no, I think they're right. They still love me. They just gave me their opinion on this particular thing. They're not calling me a bad person, or they're not saying, well, you're a bad leader or whatever. It's so easy to do that, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, Melody, it's been a joy to watch what God is doing in your life.
Thanks.
It's an honor and a privilege to be part of your life.
Thanks.
Yeah. Now, could you just speak for a few minutes just to somebody who's listening to this, to the person who's sitting there saying, I'm hopeless, I don't know. Share some hope with them.
I certainly understand, and there is hope. There's always hope, and God's hope doesn't disappoint. It's just as if it's a daily thing. We don't have to wish for it like we've talked earlier. There is hope, and there is a place that you can go if you can find a Fresh Hope, or even go online.
Sure. And more than anything, don't give up.
Yes.
Just keep going. When you're going through hell, you don't stop.
Right.
You keep taking one step after another, and you push through ultimately. If you stop, you end up at that point, and that's not a good point. You don't want to end up there.
Yeah.
But my friend, I want you to know today that it is possible to live a full and rich life in spite of having a mental health challenge. Sometimes it feels as though we can't go on. And that's when you have to say, okay, I don't want to go on. I feel like I can't. I don't even feel like God's here. But there's a choice to be made at that point. And at that point, you have to say, I choose hope. I choose to believe. I choose to believe that Jesus is going to take my circumstances and change it. Because that's his promise. He will. And you will get through it, even though you feel like you might not. You will get through it. There is hope, my friend. There is hope, and it's fresh and new every day. So hold on to that. Thank you, Melody, for sharing.
Thank you.
If you'd like encouragement, contact us at info@freshhope.us. We'd be happy to help you in any way possible. God bless you. This has been a production of Fresh Hope Ministries. For more information, go to freshhope.us.